Today we're going to talk about anxiety while playing Magic. I guess from the outset should
Yeah.
probably establish I do not mean anxiety as a diagnosed condition because I do not have that diagnosis. I mean it in the lowercase a. You might call it nerves. Maybe it goes into diagnosable. I really don't know, but I have not been diagnosed with any kind of anxiety related disorder. I'm just talking about being anxious, being tense, being nervous while playing Magic.
Yeah.
And that's been coming up a lot lately for me. And specifically, I mean, I will end a game and I will suddenly notice my muscles are tense, my shoulders are hunched forward, and I'm just kind of doing this kind of thing. I'm breathing shallowly or quickly. My heart is racing. Sometimes I can hear it throbbing in my head. And I just realize that I'm just in this highly activated state.
Yeah.
And the more logical part of my brain, had sat down thinking we're gonna jam 5 games, and this was the first game, and I'm like, I need a break, and it can take me like an hour to come down from that, and I hate it because this is a phenomenon that I mostly seem to experience in games where I feel like something's on the line.
Okay.
So almost never in constructed on Arena because there's no buy-in. But draft, there's always, even for...
Like you've invested something to get here.
Even if it's, fake money that I earned with coins, but especially when I'm trying to climb rank. Because I've, over the past 4 years or whatnot, I've hit into Diamond a few times. And a couple weeks ago, I realized I'm loving Outlaws as a draft format. I'm playing a lot of it. I'm already naturally just getting into Platinum on all my accounts. I have 3 accounts that I rotate through, which is, if you're not familiar with it, a real common just way to make drafting more affordable because you earn more quest coins. And so if you rotate through your accounts, you can just get more drafts in without having to actually pay real money for it. Side effect being you stay in lower rank longer. But I thought to myself, okay, this is the time I am going to try and really shoot for Mythic. Because consistently, like when I play enough, I gradually climb through Platinum. I've started climbing in Diamond up through Diamond 3 before, and I've never hit a spot where I just bottom out. So presumably if I just keep playing, unless I really do hit that skill peak right there, I should just make it. And I even recently subscribed to 17 lands to see my win rate over like the entire course. I've had 17 lands installed, which is back to Strixhaven.
Yeah.
And my win rate has improved the whole time, and it looks really good. And it looks better than it is, because a lot of my time is in the lower ranks, because I go between these 3 accounts, so most of them get deranked to silver or sometimes bronze, and so I'll spend a lot of time in those. And so I think if I managed to make it to Mythic, I would definitely not be able to sit at like 62% win rate. But this graph tells me I should be able to do this. And so like last Wednesday, I had most of a day off of work. I was planning to just get in there and jam those games and really start this push. And that would give me it was the 17th, I think. So almost half the month. And I got like 2 games in that day, and I was in that super activated place and just so anxious. And I have made it up to Platinum 1. And I got 2 games in yesterday. And it's just so frustrating to be fighting my own mind and body on this. So, talking about whether we should do this episode, you've said you have somewhat relatable experiences.
I have had some relatable. So I don't play as much Arena as you do, and I have personally found that on Arena I'm actually less anxious when I play online.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's because I can't see my opponent, and there's less of a... Maybe I'm just more comfortable in the space of being in my pajamas at home than I am at a table with other living, breathing people.
Yeah.
But I generally do find that the overall experience for me online is less anxiety inducing. I will say that if I have paid anything to play in an event, I do feel more of a preciousness with it almost. Okay, I gotta make this count, but there's still less of a sense of that kind of anxiety that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, I do get that if I go to in-person drafts. I get that more of you know, I've paid like real money to be
Yeah.
here. I am getting cards that I get to take home, so there's that. I'm not leaving with nothing, but I do have that, like when I'm making my picks, I have a little bit more of that heightened like
Yeah.
awareness of tension and like, okay, you have to make this count. Was this good? I don't remember. And then start questioning your
Yeah.
judgment. You're
There's a
like,
lot more
do
to
I
keep
even know
track
how to
of.
play this game? Like,
Right.
like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And then sometimes I can get really in my own head about it. Like, I try not to, but I have had some games like that, especially like in Draft and Sealed, in person, where I'm like, I get really in my head about it. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Like, what? This is stupid. And like, I don't have the numbers to back it up, but like, I've had decent performances in drafts. Like, I don't typically go 3-0, but like when they post the rankings and stuff, like I've often come in like top 3, top 4. So it's not like, I know the logical part of my brain is like, okay, I'm not the worst person here.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with being the worst person here, but like, I know that like I shouldn't have this level of self-doubt about what I'm doing.
And it gets in the way of doing the thing that obviously we both really love to do.
Yeah, like this is a thing that we do for fun.
Yeah.
This is a hobby that we enjoy.
And when I'm not focused on these elements, these either like that I'm trying to prove something or that I've invested money, have to make it worth it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way, because I know I love this game. I think about it so much. I listen to podcasts all the time. I watch other players play it, and I enjoy all of that. And most of the time I enjoy playing it myself.
Yeah, I will say that, I mean, it's much more rare, and I don't experience this, like, when we're playing with friends, but when I have been at game stores playing Commander with, like, strangers, I have sometimes had those moments, too, during a really, like, pivotal turn, especially if I'm playing a combo deck or something where it's very important to do things in a sequence or, like, to get it right, and I've gotten really hung up on that as I'm, like, I'll feel that sense of, like, almost like my hands are shaking, like I'm a little sweaty, like...
I fear this probably to... Well, I should back up and say that I have, though lately, I have not experienced hardly any anxiety at in-person events. Sometimes I'll get hyped up, like at Chicago when we did a bunch of drafts back to back.
Like, that was just very exciting.
Yeah, and then like I made it into the you know, the finals of the pod. I was in the playing for first or second a couple times there, and those I was kind of more keyed up and I would say just nervous about. But it felt justifiable. Like, I might actually just you know, win this tiny little 8-person thing, and that makes a little more sense, and it's just less debilitating. Yeah. That felt more like excitement, and I didn't need to take time to come down from it, but it wasn't just like ruining the experience, and I was able to I could shuffle up and play the next game.
Yeah.
But I will say that I have, in the past, had in-person experiences too. The very first time I went to draft. Like, I've been playing Magic since I was in middle school. The game came out when I was probably in 7th or 8th grade, and I learned to play in 8th grade. One of my formative memories is buying a Lord of Atlantis from a substitute teacher with a bag of quarters, which probably isn't great on the substitute teacher's behalf. But, you know, so I was into the game. I played casually on the floor, scuffing up all our dual lands when they were worth $1. Then, and on through high school and college. And then I continued to dip in and out of the game over the following, like, 15 years. But I didn't really have any play group or in-person group. It was more like just being a collector and sometimes designing decks, but never really getting to play them. And then at some point I was like, enough of this. I've heard this whole drafting thing is cool. I want to try it. And so I started listening to Limited Resources, and I tried a couple of Magic Online drafts, and they were hard. And I think today everyone knows, Magic Online has really stiff competition, and there aren't a lot of people hopping on that application to try it for the first time.
It's like real casual, like, I'm just gonna dip my toes into this.
And this is before Arena, so everyone who was inclined to do that online was there, but it still wasn't a lot of people. So they were pretty intense. I did not have a lot of success there, but I think I only played 2 or 3 drafts. But then I was like, okay, I'm gonna look up a local game store, and that keyed up all kinds of social anxiety. And I'm not an incredibly socially anxious person, but I'm a bit. Like, I've never liked making phone calls to make appointments or anything like so. Not a trivial experience for me. And when I showed up to that shop for the first time, I remember practically shaking, just having to go through those initial interactions of, is this where you draft? How do you sign up to
Yeah,
draft?
like, what do I do? What's the process?
Yeah, and I just had no firsthand experience. Now I can just go to an F&M draft, and that's pretty trivial for me. Maybe there's a little awkwardness with, I don't know anyone here. Do I try and make friends?
Yeah,
and
that's, like, how much do I talk to anybody? How social are we going to be?
To different people, that's a different level of anxiety all on its own. For me, that's a speed bump. It's not nothing, but it's not a big problem for me at this point in my life. It was earlier in my life.
I think it depends on my mood, because I definitely have days where, like, I'll commit to something like that. Like, yeah, we should go draft on Friday.
Yeah.
And that's extroverted me making that plan. And then Friday rolls around and I'm like, I don't really want to talk to anybody.
And I'm thinking, as we're having this discussion, there's really two sources of anxiety we're talking about here. One is social anxiety. Do I want to people? Do I have the energy for new experiences? Versus the more inner-directed anxiety about, does failing at this make me a bad person?
Yeah, I think that's more like a performance anxiety thing for me versus like the social, which I will say that as I have, like, I started playing Magic right after Khans of Tarkir released. And that was actually my first draft set, was a Khans of Tarkir draft.
Ah, you started right before me then, because
I had
Shadows over to mine.
no idea what I was doing. Like, somebody and I was actually at a shop at the time that was, it turned out, had a fairly competitive play environment. I didn't really understand the tier, you know, the levels of casual versus more competitive, but, like, I did terrible. Somebody gave me a very brief rundown of, like, you're gonna pick a card and pass the pack, and so I'm kind of just, like, trying to make the best decisions I can.
That's not a lot of information.
You know, looking at my choices, like, I don't know, you know, this seems good. Made a horrible deck, like, proceed to lose every game, but, like...
At this point, you already knew how to play the game,
I knew how to
right?
play the game, it wasn't, like, my first experience playing Magic. Like, I at least understood the rules and, like, the general concept, just like, oh, I'm gonna make a deck out of these packs, okay. Did not really understand, like, what's good in draft versus, you know, those kind of choices over my head. But, I mean, despite doing horrible, I enjoyed the idea. I was like, I mean, I kind of want to do this again. I just ended up not doing it very often at that shop, because it was pretty stiff competition, and, like, it wasn't a easy place to jump in as a new player. I'll say that. Like, it wasn't like a unpleasant experience, just kind of like you were describing Magic Online, of just like, like, this is kind of the deep end versus, like, I probably want to be more in the shallow end of the pool while I learn more about this.
And even the deep end will have, mostly people are welcoming. People, if you want to learn, they're happy to have you there, but they're going to crush you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just how it's going to go.
You know, it's like showing up to a sport that you kind of understand the rules about, but you've never really played, and it's like, okay, cool, I'm just going to jump in and, like, play against these semi-pros, and we'll see how that goes. So that was kind of the vibe. And then I kind of got out of Magic, like, off and on, sort of took breaks here and there, and then, like, I didn't really get back into seriously playing, like, often until, I think it was, like, late 2017. And then I got really into playing mostly Commander, and then we started, like, drifting back into, like, I was like, I don't know, like, I found a shop that was a little bit more my speed, and did end up doing some more draft events and sealed stuff, and I mean, generally enjoying it. I think for me, the social aspect is the social anxiety aspect got easier as I got better at playing Magic. Because I worried less about the interactions I was going to have with people, because I could at least go in knowing, like, okay, everything's going to happen within the framework of the game we're playing. And it's up to me if I want to engage more socially beyond that or not. Like, we can strictly keep it.
But then, of course, you learned that's how it works in that community,
like, that was something I had to learn through repeated experience. Because, like, the first time, you know, the first couple drafts, maybe the first 10 or so, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, you just don't know what to expect.
I don't know what to expect. What's it going to be like?
And that's always a scary thing for human beings.
Yeah, it's, like, new, it's
the people who tend toward games like Magic, we do not tend to be the most extroverted or socially comfortable. So I imagine there's a lot of people
there's
who
like a
wish
whole sea
they
of
drafted
people.
in person and just have never been willing to push through that barrier.
Yeah, I feel like most of the drafts I've been in with strangers, it's a vast majority of people are kind of on the same level, and then there'll be like one extroverted guy that's like that maybe he's a friend that someone brought along, but
Yeah,
most of us are kind of on the same wavelength.
Well, it's funny because when we play at the shop, Alpha Strike in San Marcos, Texas, sometimes, and there's a couple guys I know who are acting really extroverted. They're clearly regulars.
Yeah.
And I think I asked them, what do you do for work? And they're both in sales. Like, oh, of course.
Yeah, like they have very...
Yeah.
And
they were super friendly. They were great to play against and with and everything. But
yeah, I think one of... I don't know how relevant this will be, but when I did Magic Fest in Austin in 2020, and it was like a Command Fest. There was one game that I played against in this pod, and there was this dude across from me that the whole time we were playing the game, I was like, oh, this guy like just hates me for no reason. And I'm like, I don't know what his deal is. And it wasn't anything he said, just like his general energy, like facial expressions. And then by the end of it, like, we ended up talking about token collections, and he pulls out like this massive box, and we're just like looking through all his tokens and started talking. And I was telling somebody about this later, and they told me that I have that same energy. And so like the two of us were probably just like mirroring that until we happened to spark on like, we both really enjoy like having the proper tokens. So I don't know that I give that energy, but I've been told that on a few occasions. So I think sometimes there's that too, where we might be reading something into a situation that's not necessarily there. And like you said, this social group of people tends to be folks that are not always the most extroverted or the most socially just or like the most comfortable in like varied social situations with strangers,
right?
Which I think is not uncommon. Like, I think that's kind of a natural human thing, but you know, there's some folks that are just naturally more at ease in those kinds of situations and places. And I think as a community, I think it's safe to say that many folks in the Magic community probably wouldn't describe themselves that way.
We've gotten way off from what I thought we were going to be talking about, but I was planning to focus more on the inner directed anxiety, because that's more, I have more to say about that. Like, it's still very much a thing I am dealing with, but I also have realized a few things that help me with it sometimes. And I really feel unqualified to give any advice, because I'm still just grappling with it, and it's a problem for me right now. But I have found that if I can kind of be aware that I'm in a place where I'm prone to go into that bad headspace, I can focus on certain things that can just help defray it a bit. And those tend to be the same questions that the podcasters like Marshall and Louise on Limited Resources and Lords of Limited and Limited Level Ups, the questions they tell you to ask to improve. Like, what is my plan? How do I win this game? And I've found that going through the kind of artificial process of saying, okay, I'm going to narrate this out loud as if I was streaming or something. And I will just start kind of out loud the same pattern that I hear them doing and say, okay, I think I'm disadvantaged in the long game. I'm an aggressive deck. They don't seem to be, so I should probably commit to the board more. Certainly not play around sweepers or anything. And just kind of talk through that kind of thing. And if I can focus on the problem at hand and try and really activate that logical thinking part of the brain, it seems like the terror part of the brain has less room to expand.
That makes sense,
and when that level of understanding of the game state eludes me, as it often does at like the beginning of a format, I will say, what is a question I can answer? What is a thing I can try and figure out? And sometimes I just don't have anything to grasp for, and it's just try and learn something. Like, be paying attention not to whether you're going to win or lose, be paying attention to what do they play at instant speed, and just take that as an opportunity to start learning what instants show up in this format. And the intermediate stage, which is a lot of fun for me, is what can they have? Which again, like all of the pros strongly advise you to try and think in that term. But you know what mana they have open, what is the most likely common that they have? Is it a combat trick? Is it a removal spell? Just see which ones you can remember. And that all that helps a little bit. Just trying to purposely focus on that and get away from oh no, I might not win. Because in any given game, you don't have much control over whether you're going to win or lose. You can increase the odds that you're going to win by playing better, but Magic's a high variance game. There's always games that you're just not going to be able to win, assuming your opponent plays remotely competently, and usually they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the things that help when, because I identify that when I'm in that space of it, it's kind of a spiraling tendency. Like once you, like you were talking about the fear part of the brain expanding, that tends to, like once you kind of realize you're there, if you don't do something to rein that in, it does tend to kind of spiral or expand and just take over for me. So I haven't really tried that. I like that idea of like asking those questions, and I often do try to frame that in a general sense for myself. Like, what is my plan with this deck? Or like, what am I trying to do? Because I can't control what my opponent does. I can't control what cards they draw. I can't control how they play. So like focusing on the factors that I can control, what I'm trying to do, am I making the best choices I can? That can get a little tricky because I do have a tendency to, when I realize looking back that I made suboptimal choices, I can tend to dwell on those mistakes and really like hold on to that. But that kind of gets into a whole other thing of just like not identifying so strongly with your performance and like whether or not, you know, remembering that ultimately this is a game we play for fun, and as much as we enjoy it and invest time in it, that it doesn't reflect on who we are as a person.
That is, that is the most relatable thing, because I think at a fundamental level what's happening when I get into this place is that a part of me puts all of my self-worth on winning this game that I'm playing right now. And I know that that is a thing my mind does, because in my other things that I do in life, like when I got into playing Irish music and I was at these retreats, I would often be the newest and least skilled player in the room. And I would catch myself thinking, man, what have I accomplished with my life? I'm so bad. And it just requires remembering the context. No, you just took up a new hobby or a new practice or attempt to learn a new skill.
Yeah.
You don't ever have to be the best at this to be like worthy as a human being.
Right.
But my brain like shortcuts to that. Yeah. It really does. Almost no matter what I'm doing at the time, that becomes the thing by which I judge myself just by default. And I have to keep fixing my perspective. So I'm still operating on the premise that that's actually what's happening in these circumstances, that I'm convincing myself that not only is my value as a human being based on how good I am at Magic, but it's based on how well I play at this game.
Like this specific match.
And you know what? I really find when I draft what looks like an absolute banger of a deck, I get a lot more nervous playing it out. Because I'm like, I owe it to past self who got this great deck to actually follow. And I owe it to future self.
Yeah.
But like if I heard these kind of thoughts coming out of you or any of my other friends, I would be like, why are you being so mean to yourself? it's I really have problems keeping perspective.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, I have, that's very relatable for me, because I tell myself things that, like if you were telling me the similar thoughts that you were having about yourself, you'd be like, Derek, like you can't talk to yourself like that. Like, but yeah, I think our threshold for the kind of thoughts and feelings we'll direct inward is very different from the kind of things we would ever say to other people or tolerate our friends saying about themselves if we were vocalizing that out loud.
I think part of it might be overstating it to call it a problem, but it's a characteristic of gaming culture to call everything awesome or trash. Like
the polarized, like there's no in between.
Especially the online dialogue, which like gaming culture lives online a lot more than a lot of things, like crochet culture or something. Which also definitely has an online presence. But gaming culture is just really full of those extreme takes. And I've been watching a lot of Paul G on drafts on YouTube recently. and he has, I think, as of a couple of weeks ago, he had the highest win rate on the platform. He
Yeah.
was sitting at like 70% win rate. He's been doing trying to get to rank 1 series, which has just been great to watch because he narrates things in a really educational, easy to learn from way. But when he makes mistakes, he starts calling himself, he might not use the word idiot, but he's really derogatory and hard on himself.
I feel that. I
Out
mean,
loud.
like my inner, I'm
Yeah.
not vocalizing it, but like, I have those kind of thoughts sometimes
Yeah.
when we're like in Magic games where I'm just like, that was the dumbest decision you've ever made in your life. And
Yeah.
like, objectively, is it the dumbest decision I've ever made?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, it is not. And even if
Yeah.
it was, like, that would be a pretty low stakes, dumb decision.
Yeah. And in Paul Cheon's case,
Yeah.
he is acting, at least in this capacity, as a performer.
Sure.
So part of it may just be intentionally being dramatic for effect. Part of it may be he knows he's going to hear about any mistake in the comments and he's trying to head that off a bit. But
Yeah, like if I go ahead and say this.
yeah. But I'm at risk of modeling my own inner patter on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think as a culture, we could stand to be a little kinder to ourselves.
Definitely.
By that I mean the gaming subculture and the Magic subculture.
I have occasionally done some little experiments where because I do this even with deck building too, like outside of Draft and Sealed, but just in like Commander games sometimes I will... There's a fine line between, building something so janky that it's not even functional. You're not having... where you're not having fun because the deck is objectively not working.
I'm very familiar with that.
Versus being okay with playing something that has some suboptimal cards. Like, you can still play it to the best of your ability. You can still have fun in that space. You don't always have to be playing, like, the best possible card for your deck. So I have occasionally kind of set some arbitrary rules for myself, like whether it's budgetary or like I've done a couple with... I really enjoy building decks in the same color identities. So I've done a few where I'm like, okay, if you build in this color identity, like you can't reuse any of the same creatures you run in this other deck that's the same color identity. So I've tried to sometimes set those kind of situations up for myself where I'm intentionally going into something knowing, like, this is not going to be a competitive build. This is not going to you're not going to sit down and just be great because you brought the best cards, which not guaranteed way to be successful in the game, but, kind of going into it knowing that and trying to still have a good time and just focus on the things that I find fun about the game and less so much on, like, performance. And I've used that at times when I feel like when I notice a trend in myself where I'm leaning too far into this kind of performance-based headspace where I'll kind of use that to drag myself out of it. Like, okay, we're going to sit down and play this, like, purposely suboptimal deck.
Okay. Just kind of shift your Overton window.
Yeah, like, we're going to just shift our... we know what's in here. We know this is not the best build for this strategy. And we're going to try and still have fun with it.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Another thing I've tried sometimes, but much less successfully, particularly in Draft on Arena, is to, as is appropriate for the nature of our channel, just focus on the narrative, what's being told in the world building of the cards. Like, what does it mean that these two Drover Grizzlies show up and they're fighting with this cowboy? Because it's a lot of fun stories that just play out there, but because of the nature of the game and sort of the spikiness inherent in playing on Arena, because you're not there to chat with people. There's no one to chat with. All you have is the game, so all there really is to focus on is the game. So just redirecting focus to the cool art. And the
whatever it is that I think that there's a lot of space there, however that works for you as a player, to find something that you can focus on that's not about winning and performance. Whether it's art or just a particular card that you like or mechanics that you think are really cool or just something aside from, did I win this match?
Well, I guess that kind of brings it all to something that maybe we should have said at first, which is why then are we talking about this if we don't really have good, clear answers. I mean,
Yeah.
I still struggle with this. It sounds like this comes up for you sometimes in real life still. I just think it's a really important thing to talk about, in the same sense that our in culture on the whole has moved toward talking about mental health issues and that sort of thing in the past decades. I think the gaming culture might lag a little behind there, and we should try and integrate that too. And I know it's very common for people on YouTube videos to ask people to comment about things as a engagement tactic, and usually it's kind of obvious. But in this case, I would very much authentically like to hear from other people about their experiences with this, if they have experienced this sort of thing and found ways to help that work for them that they would like to share with us or others.
Yeah, I agree. If any part of this resonated with you as a viewer, or you want to add something of your own about this topic, or something that you found helpful in your life, I would love to read about that too.
I have no idea if there really is the appetite for talking about this in this medium, but I would be happy to revisit it if there is.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Good.
I think so.
All right. Okay, we are running this deck in Quick Draft, and we are one tick away from Diamond. And we're going to see if we can make it in this next game. We're at 5 wins so far. 1 loss. There's that Plat 1 with 1 tick left to go. I'm already feeling pretty anxious, high heart rate, a little tingly, hands shaking a little. And that's all when I waited until a moment where I felt I was in a pretty calm, chill place. But we're going to see. Preparing. I really like that right now. Quick Draft is broken, so it doesn't show you your rank and your opponent's rank. So I would very much like a 2-drop, but we have all our lands. We've got a Congregation Griff, we've got a 3 and a 4, we've got excellent removal sword into the base. See what happens. And, well, it's really good they didn't have a 2, so we're not as likely to get completely run over, but it still seems pretty probable. So what do they have on 3? They are stuck on lands. That is really good news, but it does mean once they get unstuck on lands, they're going to have pretty strong position. So next turn we're planning on Prosperity Tycoon. Yes, we are. So they discard the hand size. Yeah, I think we want a Tycoon. We're likely to end up in a race condition here. Is it worth playing the Prairie Dog and keeping out Veil? They could end up with a Mystical Tether. The Prairie Dog doesn't saddle this, so that doesn't give us that opportunity. Yeah, I think that's what we do. Because if they do try to go with like a Mystical Tether this upcoming turn, or if they had a, once the removals failed, it destroys an attacking creature, or Ariad's Lullaby, like that could, that's their plan. Okay, that was a good move to save it. Whew. And that is that's an kind of doesn't feel the most earned way to get to Diamond, but there we are.